You're watching The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
Good afternoon, everybody. We will not be talking about today's verdict. It's not what we do here. It's not what we are about. What we will be talking about: Our Flags Mean Death, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, She-Hulk Attorney at Law, Madam Web, big changes at Warner Brothers, and we're going to break down the first 2 episodes of Kenobi. I know there's been 3, but there's a good chance a lot of you haven't had a chance to see 3, so we'll deal with 3 tomorrow, and 3 is kind of big enough on its own for an episode, but we'll deal with number 1 and number 2 today here on the damn Wickline Show, so stay tuned. A little early on the Experience joke there. Welcome to the damn Wickline Show here on the Experience. Today we are going to be talking about the Kenobi first 2 episodes, but we're going to get to that after we break down some news. Originally I was going to do Kenobi yesterday, but with the announcement that Joe Quesada was stepping down from Marvel, it seemed to be big enough that we should spend the day on it. So we're moving Kenobi today, which I know confuses things because the 3rd episode dropped last night. I've already seen it. But we're going to hold off on talking about that until tomorrow, which makes it a little difficult because there were things that I was thinking on the first 2 episodes that the 3rd episode kind of went, So I'll have to recollect my thoughts without covering episode 3. But first, we're going to get into some news. Yes, there was the verdict. That's done. Thank God. Well, probably not done. They're going to probably do appeals like crazy. But yeah. Let's get to the actual news that people really care, or at least pop culture news that we care about. First thing, the big thing is, I get that TMZ thing off the screen. I don't even want the words TMZ on here. All right. Start with, we are going to talk about, my friend Irene literally posted last night, when are they going to renew Our Flag Means Death? Well, the answer to that is today. HBO has announced that the series has been renewed. And if you haven't watched it yet, it is very different. It's from Taika Waititi. And if you watch What We Do in the Shadows, then you'll get the kind of sense of humor for this. It is very loosely based on the true adventures of an 18th century would-be pirate named Stead Bonnet. He's played by Rhys Darby. And basically the guy was, a leisurely life gentleman who decided to give it all up to captain a pirate ship, to the swashbuckling adventure life. But the problem is that he's not very good at it. He has a hard time getting respect of his crew. And at one point, which I haven't gotten to in the series, but I know what happens in this sense, he meets up with the infamous Captain Blackbeard, and the two fall in love. So I've only watched a couple episodes so far. It feels very much like what we get from Taika Waititi, but with the dryness and subtlety that you get sometimes from Monty Python. Monty Python's not always subtle. Sometimes they're slap you in the face with a wet fish. But other times they're subtle, and that's kind of what we get here. Other news. James Gunn is bringing another. James Gunn loves to bring in actors he's always worked with. Basically, if you work with James Gunn and he likes you, there's a good chance you're going to be working for the rest of your life. Hence, Michael Rooker, his brother Sean, yeah, Nathan Fillion. I mean, just these guys are always at least going to get cameos. Well, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is no different, as it's adding a member of the Suicide Squad. Daniela Melchior, who played Ratcatcher 2 in the Warner Brothers movies, will now have a small part in the MCU. Now, we don't know what that part is, but we do know one person that she's not playing. Gunn has actually come out and said she will not be playing Moondragon, who is a character from the Guardians comics and also Avengers comics that a lot of fans have been waiting to see. She's a member of the Guardians from the same era as Gamora, Rocket, and Groot. That they've been kind of hoping she'd turn up, but not yet. So, or at least not played by Daniela Melchior. All right. There was some big news today, but it was kind of hidden in an announcement. Warner Brothers Discovery, the new combined Warner Brothers, and they've announced that Toby Emmerich will be stepping down as chairman of the Motion Picture Group. Now, former MGM film execs Michael DeLuca and Pam Abdi will be coming in as the new co-chairpersons and CEOs of Warner Brothers Picture Group. Now, that's under Warner Brothers Discovery, which is David Zaslav. He's the CEO of that. But along with that change, they're creating this new structure that basically is similar to how Disney does their stuff. And there's going to be 3 divisions underneath the Warner Brothers Picture Group, which will be Warner Brothers Pictures and New Line Cinema will be one group. Warner Brothers Features Animation will be another group. And then DC-based film production will be its own group. This is basically setting up the possibility of bringing in someone to guide DC in the same way that Kevin Feige guides Marvel. They've created a Kevin Feige position. Now they just need to choose the right person. It's got to be somebody who knows the books, knows the characters, and also has, the ability to scope out a large universe like that. And I got to say, Mr. Zaslav, I am available. Give me a call. Jeff Johns had something of that kind of role for a while. I don't know. I don't know if he would be, it's possible. Greg Berlanti would be another name that I think people would at least think of with his experience with all the DC television shows. But that's a very specific type of thing. So with Greg Berlanti, you're getting a certain type of show or movie. It could be Jeff Johns. Yeah, that's kind of my feeling too. Like, we've already done the Jeff Johns thing, but then we have a whole new crew. A whole new regime at Warner Brothers. So nothing says they can't go back to him. But I don't know if there's anybody off the top of my head that would have the knowledge of the comics and no, JD. Don't even. That's like saying Candyman in the mirror 3 times. What are you doing? Don't even mention that name on my show. How dare you? Just going to throw me off now. Jeez. I don't know. I don't know if there's anybody that comes out that just jumps out. Because a lot of the people, like, it was kind of what Zack Snyder was doing for a minute, kind of like what Christopher Nolan was doing. The problem is you don't want to take a director and do it because you want the director to direct. You want them to do what they do best. So Kevin Feige kind of moved up in the world. You'd have to look at some of the producers on some of the bigger hit movies and see which one seems to be rising. Josh says, besides, John needs to focus finally writing Justice Society. Yes. Jeff Johns is great at writing legacy characters and grabbing the knowing the hearts of the characters, which is something I think is really good. So, all right, let's see. Let's go on to our next bit of news. This one kind of surprises me a little bit, and it's not so much that it surprises me. Oh, actually, I'm jumping ahead. Speaking of DC television, and definitely needing somebody like Kevin Feige at DC, the trailer for Gotham Knights was dropped yesterday, and it's horrible. Most fans online seem to hate it. And in a lot of ways, it feels like a bad Elseworlds, you know? It's a ton of new characters mixed in with, like, they've just borrowed character names. And none of them seem to fit well into the mythos. And it's almost like, well, we need to do a Batman show, but we can't actually do a Batman show, so we'll just borrow the name. Gotham. Yeah. Gotham Knights, it's a video game. We'll just borrow that name. It's like they tried to merge Titans and Riverdale and came up with this mess. I mean, it just is absolutely horrible looking, which means it'll probably be a hit on the CW. Okay, over at where I was going to go story-wise, over at Sony, Isabella Merced has just signed on to the Madam Web project that already includes Dakota Johnson, Sydney Sweeney, and Celeste O'Connor. And Merced is coming off of like Father of the Bride remake that's coming out. She's also going to play Juliet in this revisionist version of Romeo and Juliet called Rosalind. But at this point, does anybody really know what they're doing with Madam Web? I mean, the character in the comics is an elderly woman on life support that has psychic sensory powers. I mean, I've seen a couple websites refer to her as kind of the Doctor Strange of the Sony verse of Marvel characters, but she always seemed more like a Professor Xavier type for Spider-Man, you know? Yeah, I'm not sure what they're going to do with this. I don't see where the story is. I mean, is Dakota Johnson playing Madam Web? That's very different. Or is there going to be an older woman playing Madam Web, and these other actors are like suddenly a team she puts together? You know, like Ironside, or, you know, a bizarre version of Nero Wolfe. JD says, look, man, I just got here and you already insulted me by talking about Madam Web movies. That's not nearly as bad as the name that JD said a few minutes back. Man, he brought up the sacred name, or the Antichrist. All right, got one more bit of news. Found my notes here. We got some casting news for She-Hulk Attorney at Law, which is kind of weird because the show's already debuted, or is set to debut on August 17th. And you would think they would all be in post-production now because there's all the CG they have to do for the series. So it kind of feels like, would you please stop mentioning that name? Just stop, JD. Just stop mentioning the name. So yeah, She-Hulk is still adding, and it's not just a character, it's a recurring, they're adding a recurring character, though we don't know who the character is. We do know that they're bringing in Griffin Matthews from the Flight Attendant series. But again, why are they bringing somebody in now? I mean, we're just over 2 months away? 2 months and 2 weeks away, and they're still shooting, and they're going to get the CG done? I mean, I guess the series is going to run, it's 9 episodes, so it's going to run for a little while, but oh wow, that means Andor, 12-episode series, and She-Hulk, a 9-episode series, are going to be running around the same time. We're going to have a lot of weeks with 2 shows to cover. I do like that. All right, guys. That is the news as I was able to find. again, I think the most interesting thing out of all of this is going to be what's going to happen to that new slot at Warner Brothers. If you guys have some suggestions on who you think might, throw it in the thing, other than the name JD says. Man. You messed me up, JD. You really did. All right, you know what? Let's go ahead and go to break. When we come back, we'll talk Obi-Wan Kenobi. We'll be right back.
Did you know that every experience show, including some exclusive content, streams on Twitch? Check it out. Twitch.tv/the_EXP. Or just scan that QR code.
Comic Collectibles is a pretty straightforward show. You got Rex here, he sells the comics, and you got Rocket Robbie, he knows about the comics. And finally, John, well, no one really knows what John does. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a great guy, but he just keeps showing up. Come to think of it, I don't even really know how he gets in here. Anyway, awesome comics, rare books, rarer signatures, slabbed books, and amazing cover sketches by Ken Hazer and others. Simple formula, you want the comics, you buy the comics. To sum up, Rex sells the comics, Robbie knows the comics, and John, who might possibly be a ghost. I mean, seriously, has anyone ever seen him show up or leave? Comic Collectibles with Rex and John, Mondays from 6 to 8 Eastern on The Experience. Comic Culture and Sales.
There's something for every imagination at your local comic shop. Visit ComicShopLocator.com to find a store near you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience, and we're going to be talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi. Before I jump into that, though, Star Wars related, with the announcement of Jedi Survivor, the sequel to Jedi Fallen Order, I have had Jedi Fallen Order on my computer for about a year. I was going to say months, but it's been about a year. And I've been thinking about playing and planning to play it. But, I got pulled back into World of Warcraft, pulled back into D&D, projects. So the other night, I decided, let me start it. But just for fun, I started streaming. I figured, I'll just throw this up on my YouTube channel, see if people want to watch an old man gaming. Turned out I got some pretty good hits. I gamed for about an hour. I got through the first section of it. I may continue doing that. So if you want to check out my YouTube channel and you want to see a playthrough of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order by someone who really isn't good at video games. I'm good at World of Warcraft. I'm a tank. It's not hard to be a tank. You just run in, you take a lot of hits, and you just got to do your timing. So this is not a game I'm particularly good at, but I'm also doing it on story mode. So if you want to know the story, tune in and you can hear my commentary as we go along. So that's over on my YouTube channel. All right, let's get into Kenobi. And as I get started here, I had a mindset coming in. Josh says, I'd argue that the characters in Fallen Order are more interesting than most new Star Wars content. They just don't get to do much, so I'm really hyped for the sequel. You know, I agree. I agree in a way. I think Mando's a great character. Don't get me wrong. I think Din Djarin is one of the best Star Wars characters in a long time as well. But I like Cal Kestis a lot. The interesting thing is the announcement for Survivor places it 5 years ahead of Fallen Order. Well, that means that it's happening around the same time as the Kenobi series. So I don't know where things are going to go, but maybe we get a Cal Kestis or a Siri or an appearance by someone from the game. I mean, they've been tying in Rebels and Clone Wars, and there's a name drop from Clone Wars in last night's episode. I won't say what it is, but they are trying to tie all this stuff together. Maybe. How awesome would it be to see Cameron Manheim pop up to help out Kenobi at one point? Just a thought. So, all right. So, as I was going to do today's episode, JD said something to me. And it kind of messed with my head, besides mentioning that name. But, JD, you got your mic on? JD's probably over there doing regular work. Oh, there he is. All right, JD. Explain to me what you said.
Oh, there we go. I said that it seemed to be that it was a kid's show.
And why did you say that? What is it about the show that makes it seem like a kid's show?
Well, a focus on, the sassy 9-year-old or 10-year-old, I guess, at this point. All of the villains and most of the other characters seem very over the top, overblown. They don't. There's no subtlety in this show.
Okay.
And there's a lot of character choices that seem like if you're over the age of 12, you might think, why would you do that?
I'm going to counter that.
Okay.
In that I think Star Wars as a whole has always been geared towards younger audiences.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that this is a change. I think this is what they do. They're geared towards younger audiences. That's why so many people love the original series, because we were 7, 8, 9, 10 when we saw them.
Yeah. I mean, if you look back now, they are not, everything except for The Empire Strikes Back are not great films.
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while they get dark. But on that, I kind of think the tone is similar to Empire in especially the third episode, some of the things that happen in the third episode. But there's this trope that that Star Wars is doing right now of pairing a gruff character with a child.
Yeah.
And they're doing it in everything. It's the basis for The Mandalorian.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's the Bad Batch.
Yeah.
It's Kenobi.
Yeah, I would counter with Mandalorian's direct takeoff of Lone Wolf and Cub.
Right, but it's still that formula. And in a lot of ways, it was the Clone Wars. Putting Anakin with the young Ahsoka.
Yeah. I think with everyone except for The Mandalorian, it was like they were giving the kids in the audience a way into the narrative, a perspective. But it just seems like no, I can't come up with the words I want, unfortunately. it seems, I mean, Disney is the master of creating content that kids love and don't bore the parents.
Right.
And I think that they've been skewing towards the kids lately.
Toy sales.
Like, yeah, especially with Boba Fett, which was just nonsensical but really cool. In a lot of areas. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Boba Fett was a lot more fan service than it should have been, and a little lack on story.
Yeah.
You know, but I look at, you know, the first episode I definitely wouldn't consider a kids show.
Well, you got to imagine, like, my nieces and nephews saw, you know, Return of the Sith or Revenge of the Sith when they were like 9 or 10. So, yeah, I mean, it's, you know, a horrifying scene,
right?
But you know, kids have watched it before and been fine.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not disagreeing in that sense, but I don't think it's anything out of the normal for Star Wars. Just like Doctor Who was originally created for children, you know, and it's still kind of that way, but adults embrace it. So
maybe I'm just getting old.
It could be. It could be. I just think there's a lot of angst in what's going on with Kenobi that's a little above kids' age. You know, what he's feeling, the fact that he's completely stepped away from his Jedi training, you know, and just every time when the name Anakin is dropped, it's like he's having PTSD flashbacks.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I see what you're saying, but I don't think I think it's normal trope. It's a normal thing for Star Wars.
I mean, you know, maybe I should go back and watch it again.
Yeah. All right.
What do you guys think?
Yeah. You and the Josh and JD and stuff. What do you guys think? Do you think this is skewing more towards kids than normal? Or do you think this is pretty standard Star Wars fare? I thought that was a pretty good way to ask that question.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into details here. Thank you, JD. The first episode I thought was really interesting, but also a little boring. You know, a lot of sand. Oh, you haven't seen it yet, Josh? Why are you tuning in? I'm going to do spoilers. Oh, yeah. Spoiler warning, please. All right. So we're not going to talk about last night's episode. That'll be tomorrow. But focusing on the first two episodes, I think the first episode is a lot of what we expected. And the second one there was an element that we didn't expect. We expected Kenobi on Tatooine. We expected there'd be something that drives him to, you know, deal with the Inquisitors. And I kind of figured it'd be another Jedi, something like that. Or maybe pulling from the comics the whole Black Chrysanthemum story where Jabba sends Chrysanthemum out to collect taxes. He ends up, or to figure out why the tax collector was killed. And he ends up attacking Owen, and Ben has to come to the rescue. Didn't go there. What they did was they took a good chunk of time establishing Ben. We know Obi-Wan Kenobi. We know Obi-Wan Kenobi as the guy who will drop down in the middle of a separatist army to take on General Grievous and just say, hello there. Obi-Wan Kenobi, who really wasn't afraid to take on anybody. That's not who we meet in this episode. We meet a guy whose faith is rocked. I mentioned that he seems like he's suffering from PTSD. I think I think the Battle of Mustafar was that. I think it was such a traumatic situation that has left him scarred as much emotionally as Anakin is physically. He is doing his job of watching over Ben, but he's not doing his job. He's not trying to train him. I mean, at one point he tells Owen the boy has to be trained, which we know Owen does the great comeback, like you trained his father. But Jedi training starts young. I mean, really young. Kenobi was taken out of his home within the first 6 months of his life. Luke is like 10 years old at this point. So Ben isn't training Luke. He isn't teaching him the ways of the Force. He's just sitting back and hoping nobody attacks him. And he's put together this mundane life on this barren planet, and in a way it feels like it's a penance. Like he feels that he failed. He failed Qui-Gon. He didn't train Anakin as he had promised. He failed Anakin. He failed the Jedi Order and the Force. I think it's just across the board. He feels like he failed. And knowing his history, Obi-Wan always wanted to be the perfect Jedi. That was his goal, to live by the code and to do all the things right. And he's way off the rails here. So he's gone insular. He's kind of like Luke at during one of those horrible sequel movies, where he's cut himself off from the Force. It doesn't even look like he uses it anymore. He doesn't sense anything. So it's really interesting. He's dreaming of Vader and of Padme and all that's happened. We're getting a PTSD version of Kenobi, but this is Ben Kenobi. This is not Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan is gone, is the best way I could describe it. Yeah, JD, I agree. I think they needed to have the first 2 episodes released at once, because that first one was rough. We have the confrontation with Owen. We get to meet the Inquisitors. Rupert Friend is the Grand Inquisitor. I think he portrayed the character well, but they could have done a little better on his looks. And I know that's been the big knock, because he doesn't really look like the Grand Inquisitor. And I realize there's a difference between animation and live action, but the race that he has been seen in live action, and the heads are much more elongated, where his is kind of very round. He's like an orange on a toothpick. There's a vague reference for you. But I thought he performed the character well. The way he berated and talked, he was lecturing the people at the bar in a very condescending tone. That's the Grand Inquisitor from the video, or from the art animation series. I find the fifth brother and the third sister very interesting. Reva, the third sister, played by Moses Ingram, is just a ball of hate, just a ball of anger, which I find fascinating, because I think we got that opening scene where we see Order 66 taking place. And again, that was kind of triggering for what just happened in Texas. And Disney's trying to deal with that by put up warnings and stuff just in case. But Order 66, that moment is starting to become the Martha and Thomas Wayne of Star Wars. That, do we need to see this again? But this time we see it is this group of kids, and we see the kids trying to escape. And we first pan in on a child that could very easily have been Reva, which would explain why she seems to have an anger specifically towards Kenobi, because she would see that Kenobi failed. That those were Kenobi's, or those Anakin's troops. But Kenobi was training Anakin, and Anakin went to the dark side, which is Kenobi's failure. So I think she blames Kenobi as much as he blames himself. So that's our protagonist and antagonist. And I realize that we have Darth Vader in this series, but I don't necessarily think he's the antagonist. He's part of it. But I think Reva is the bigger one at this point. And we see how she works. She's willing to threaten to kill people to get information, where the others use the carrot over the stick. She's clever. She also sets up the thing that draws Kenobi out. And that leads to the surprise part of the series. We all knew we were going to get Ben Kenobi. What we didn't know is we were going to get young Leia. We knew young Luke was going to pop up because he's on the same planet. That's what Ben's doing. He's watching Luke. But we get a young Leia, and we get Bail Organa. We get Jimmy Smits. And I hadn't heard anything about Jimmy Smits showing up in the series. So that was really cool to see him. But we get a young Leia who has moments that seem to flash of her using the Force. It's when she's talking to her cousin and reads him, or when she sees Ben and reads him. I get the feeling that that's a Force thing. That's part of what Leia's ability. But because she's not around a Jedi or a Force user to hone that, it's more of a subtle instinctual thing than it is something she thinks she's using. You know? It was nice that we got off of Tatooine. Star Wars has had a Tatooine problem lately. A lot of the shows are on Tatooine. So getting off of there, I'm all for. Going to Alderaan, of all places, that's kind of cool, because we really haven't seen much of Alderaan. I mean, we saw it in like the background once. Otherwise, it's just a big, you know. So I liked going to Alderaan. I liked seeing the forest on Alderaan. It took, for just a moment, I was taken out of the scene when the bad guy chasing her turned out to be Flea of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Now, I know a lot of people probably don't recognize him on sight, and the fact that he's done acting before, but it kind of threw me off because I'm a bass player, and he's one of the best bass players, so you kind of know him when you see him. It's like if John Entwistle, who's dead, but if John Entwistle had popped up in the original Star Wars movie, I would have gone, hey, wait a minute. But I thought he did fine. But episode 1 was all set up. You know, we got a little bit of Leia. We got a little bit of that excitement level. The actress playing Leia is great. You know, I'm not a big fan of child actors when they have so much to deal with, but she's doing great. And I guess she comes from Bird Box. She was in Bird Box, so they definitely cast someone with experience. But that kid's killing it. There are moments she says something or does something, and it's like, oh, that's like Carrie. That's like perfect Carrie Fisher moment there. Well, as they keep it going, we move on to the second episode. Now, the second episode is really where things start getting interesting. You know, Bail guilts Ben into, I mean, we see how much Ben has given up when he won't help the other Jedi, which ends up leading the Jedi to being killed. How he buried his lightsabers in the sand in the middle of nowhere. I mean, if you think about it, there were no markers. He had to like sense where it was or something. I don't think he ever planned to go back for it. I get the feeling by where he buried it, he was done. You know, you don't go in the middle of nowhere and bury it with the idea that I'm going to go back and get it. You put it out there where there's no markers or anything because you don't ever want to see it again. Well, he has to pick it up, and he gets on the ship to go help Leia and go to... I had the name of the planet they're going to. Dathomir? Planet names are rough. So basically they go to Blade Runner City. And it's interesting because it feels kind of like there was a Star Wars series they had talked about for a while that would have been like the underground of Coruscant and the criminal worlds and stuff. And we get that kind of feel here. This is a shadiness. You can buy spice on every corner. One girl gives them a free spice thing of spice. And by the way, that girl is played by Ewan McGregor's daughter, real life daughter. So that was kind of interesting scene. But there was a few things that happened. Faces that look familiar but aren't quite, like droids, like a Forlom droid that is the same class but not the same bounty hunter. There was a clone trooper begging because it's like, what do we do with our vets after we've replaced them with new troopers? And of course, Temuera Morrison does that part, which is interesting because that really is the first time we've seen him as a clone trooper. We never really got to see him much as a clone trooper without, just... But yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. You get the sense that it's a trap pretty early. I mean, obviously, but I don't know. I thought it was interesting. We're halfway through the series now, and again, won't talk about tomorrow night. But Kenobi is kind of clumsily moving his way through, doing what he needs to do. There's a fight scene where he's taking on these guys in the hallway, and he's punching people. And part of it is you realize that he hasn't done a lot of fist fighting before. But he's not using the Force. At no point do we see him use the Force to fight in the whole first two episodes. The only time he uses the Force is to save Leia when she falls off the building. And it looked like he really had to tap into something to be able to do that. And we're talking about a Jedi who was probably one of the most powerful, struggling to connect to the Force, which shows just how much he's cut himself off from it. But as he's fighting, there's a moment. The first time I saw it, I thought, "Oh man, he's just hurting his hands on all this stuff. He's not used to it." And I forgot that one of the creatures he was fighting was a Zabrak, the same as Darth Maul, with the horns on the head. And when you watch it closer, you realize he cuts his hand open on one of the Zabrak's horns. That's why he's bleeding when he's confronted by Flea later on. He says, "I didn't think Jedis bled." That's why he's bleeding, because he cut his hand on a Zabrak horn. I do like the fact that he's clever. He's been given a spice pack. Let's use that spice pack. And it was also neat to see somebody actually under the influence of spice. We got a little of that in Boba Fett when the spice cloud went over. You saw a little bit of reaction by the Tuscans. But overall, it's part of the universe that was set up, but they never really gave us any because, again, geared towards children, you don't want to show drug use. We can mention the spice is there, but we're only going to hint at what it's used for. We're not actually going to say what it's used for, or we'll be subtle about it. We won't show somebody using it. So the fact we actually get to see somebody on it is a big jump, JD says when he went out in the desert with the shovel, he thought he was going to dig up the Jedi Starfighter. That would be interesting. They are small enough. You probably could bury one. It'd be like, they're kind of the equivalent of a Volkswagen Bug. They're very small fighters. Yeah, they're tiny. They usually have a droid, and he did have a droid buried. So maybe this Starfighter was buried. I don't know. But he took a commercial ship because I think his ship would set off signals. But we see the first two episodes are really establishing not only how much Ben has fallen, but exactly what Reva's willing to do. The fact that she sets up this kidnapping of a senator's daughter, which could cause a lot of problems, and that she, when the Grand Inquisitor talks about, oh, I'm going to take the credit for this, and she runs him through with a lightsaber, that's pretty intense. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Let's do our final commercial break. We'll be right back.
Who would win, Batman or Superman? It's the age-old debate, except it's so much more complicated than that. Nerd Killer Warfare every week on The Experience is your chance to debate other nerds in the questions we've all been asking for years, except we take those debates and turn them up to 11. Go to bit.ly/EXP casting or scan the QR code to be part of the show.
Imagine being at a convention and going to an interview panel that's just for you. No bustling crowds, no hours-long lines, just you, the moderator, and your favorite comic book creators. Well, this is pretty much that. Miss Jen sits down every week with two comic book creators for a live stream interview about their latest work, and you can ask them whatever you want. It's Talking Shop, Mondays at 5 Eastern on The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. We are talking about the first two episodes, Kenobi. We will deal with the third episode tomorrow. But stick around after the show. We'll be Comics Collectibles with Rex and John. And then we'll have Wednesday Warriors with Joey and Ambrosia. So 2 hours of Rex and John, and then at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, Wednesday Warriors. So you definitely want to stick around for that. Grand Inquisitor getting killed. Appearing to get killed. I have to say appearing to get killed because he's a big part of the Rebels series. So either one of two things has to happen here. Either, because we know Rebels is canon. Ahsoka. We got Sabrine Wren coming up. And I think Hera is going to be in the Ahsoka series as well. And we know Chopper is going to be in the series. He was at Star Wars Celebration. So what about a dead Grand Inquisitor? So either one of two things. Either this isn't the Grand Inquisitor, even though he looks a lot like the Grand Inquisitor, the head shape is wrong, but the facial markings are right, all of that. So maybe they're saying, well, this isn't the guy, and we're going to bring in one with the right head. The other thing is, he's going to get fixed. Run through the stomach. If Fifth Brother was there, was able to stop him and get him to a back to tank, maybe a mod guy, it's possible. If you can survive being cut in half, falling down a 20-story shaft in this world, you can survive a lightsaber in the stomach. Fair point. Yeah, fair point. Yep. You think someone was there to catch Maul and run him to a med bay or put him in a back to tank and just kind of push him together and close the door? A little duct tape. You'll be okay, boss. You'll be okay. That needs to be a Disney Plus series. The Fall of Maul. Literally, from the moment he gets cut in half to him showing back up again with spider legs for a while? Yeah. We can get Scott Buck to write that series. All right. So, yeah, I think the Grand Inquisitor will be back. Because otherwise that creates a huge plot hole. And Star Wars is pretty good about not doing that. Subtle ones, small ones that you're not going to notice, but killing a character who's going to show up a lot in a canon series, yeah, I think that would be something they wouldn't do. But anyway, so looking at the second episode, I really liked the fact that the Ben we get, he fights, but it's only Fall of Maul Part 1. Part 2 would be the legs. He's fighting, but he never brings out the lightsaber, which makes sense because as soon as you use a lightsaber, it's like, attention, please, there's a Jedi in the room, But he's not very good at the other fighting with other weapons, which makes me think that Jedi should be trained in all weapon fighting. Just saying. If they do a new Jedi Order, they should have multiple training, gunfighting. They can bring in a Mandalorian to teach gunfighting. But the fact that he doesn't engage. He engages the bounty hunters because he's kind of on the same level and he needs to. But he hides from Reva. He hides from another Force user. He almost seems scared. And then when he can get away, but she tells him Anakin's alive, that look on his face, and he only says the name Anakin, but that look on his face at the end shows you the trauma he's been through and just how broken he really is. In a lot of ways, I wondered going into this, what is this series telling us? What is this series filling in for us? This just isn't the story of old Ben. I think this is the story of how Obi-Wan Kenobi goes from the end, how he goes from the end where he is broken and I don't think they really got into it in the movie as much as they could have, but shows the emotional journey from having to kill his own Padawan, having to kill his friend, to being the guy who would hop on a starship with Luke and fly back out into the galaxy because Leia needs him. We never really got that sense that there was a strong connection between Ben and Leia because we never saw it. Ben and Leia never spend any time together in the movies. You know, when they got her out of the cell and is going back to the ship is when he's fighting Vader and gets killed. Yet Leia names her son Ben. Han didn't have that connection with him either. Luke did. So where did Leia's connection come from? Well, this is answering that question. But also, I think as we're going on, this is going to show how Leia helps him regain his confidence to get back at least to what Obi-Wan was. So that, because it took a lot of confidence for, you know, when on the Millennium Falcon, Ben's like, I'll go take care of the compactor or the tractor beam. I got this, no problem. You know, because that's not the Ben we get at the beginning of this. We get the one that hides, that he wouldn't have left Tatooine. He wouldn't have let Luke leave Tatooine because he would want to keep Luke safe. That's all he's been about. But because it was Leia asking for help, there had to be a connection between the two of them to make him leave Tatooine, to not only make him leave, but to be okay with Luke going too. So I think that's the thing. That's the journey we're taking. And I think Leia is a key to that. And I didn't think that originally because I thought maybe she'd just be in the first second episode and be done. But now I'm thinking she's going to be as much of a key for him, or she's going to be the key for him getting back to being the Jedi. So that's my thoughts on that. You know, yes, they're doing the same tropes that they're doing in all the shows, but I think in here, it being Leia is very specific and very important. Hey, Dan, happy Wednesday. Don't bother watching Fantastic Beasts, The Secrets of Dumbledore. What a snooze fest. Thank you, Mark. I was literally thinking of watching that tonight. So, okay. Good to know, and good to see you, Mark. All right, we're going to wrap that up here. Thank you guys for coming in, watching, hanging out. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time to talk about the third episode of Kenobi that dropped last night. So get a chance to watch it. And we definitely want to talk about that ending and what happened in that show. That one's definitely a good one. So come back tomorrow. Stick around now for Comic Collectibles with Rex and the Ghost John. See you tomorrow, guys. Good night.
Get the inside scoop on everything happening at the experience every week. Join our mailing list by scanning the QR code at the bottom of the screen and then watching your email inbox.